invite you to join me in a moment of prayer. Let us pray. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Come as fire and cleanse. Come as light and reveal. Come as wind and fill. Convict, convert, and consecrate, O Lord, until we are wholly yours. Amen. So I served a church once where they had a volleyball team, and I joined the volleyball team even though I didn't know anything about volleyball. And even though I didn't know anything about volleyball and I was on the team elected me to be the coach of the volleyball team. I mean, I had maybe seen a couple of Olympic games, didn't really know anything about it, but I thought, well, how hard can it be? Call time out once in a while and give a little inspirational pep talk. And so that's how I functioned as coach. I didn't know any strategies or plays or anything, but I could call a good timeout and give the speech. And so, I would wait till the team was struggling a little bit, call the timeout, and then give them an inspirational speech. And it always started about, let me tell you a story about a ragtag group of misfits. Then I'd tell him something about, the Battle of Carthage or something, because the Roman Empire, we're always thinking about the Roman Empire. And have you heard about that? The TikTok thing? You've heard about it? That they have all these videos where wives are asking their husbands or mates, partner, asking men, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And turns out quite a bit. One guy's like 5 times a day at least. And the partners are like, what? What is there to think about? Well, the Battle of Carthage when you're playing volleyball. So I went along as coach like that for a while, and then somebody, Lori Reynolds, she looked up at me one day and said, how come we're always a ragtag group of misfits? And because that's the only speech I've got, duh. The prophets were kind of like coaches who had to figure out what speech to give at what moment to help the people. I think about the prophets as being like coaches in several ways. First, they were always focused on what are the fundamentals. If you've ever had a coach, they always want to make sure you've got those fundamentals down, those techniques down, for them, talking about the fundamentals of worship, of loving God, of serving your neighbor, of being humble, of being in gratitude for what God has given you, and to keep the commandments and the Sabbath. And they were also people who, when people got too puffed up and full of themselves, the prophets could knock them down a peg. And they had a quick wit, and they could be biting sometimes. They could even be mean a little bit. Talking about, Amos talking about the cows of Bayshore, talking about rich people who were horrible human beings. Call them cows. They could knock them down a peg, but they also had their most challenging moments when they had to inspire and lift people up after a defeat. And maybe you've had some experience coaching or even talking to your kids or a friend, somebody who's had just one of those soul-crushing defeats where they've got their chin buried in their chest and they look at you for some word of hope. Have you been in this situation? They're looking at you. What have you got? Well, that's a situation that Isaiah found himself in. The people had just had a demoralizing, catastrophic defeat, and they were turning their eyes to the prophet. You, man of God, what does God have to say to our situation? What can you do to help us? You see, they had just gone through the worst of the worst. Israel had been taken over by the Babylonians. The Babylonians came in, they destroyed the entire city of Jerusalem. It was just left as a smoldering pile of rubble. They kicked people out of their houses, and the army moved into people's houses. Devastation everywhere. They took people off into exile, all of the best and brightest, the artisans, the leaders. They carried them, marched them into exile, and people's families were ripped apart. The temple was destroyed. They were wondering, well, maybe this whole God thing was just a hoax anyway. Isaiah, what have you got? For some reason, I think of Simon and Garfunkel here. Remember that line about, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? A nation turns its lonely eyes to you. They're asking, where have you gone, prophet Isaiah? A nation turns its lonely eyes to you. What have you got? So Isaiah spends time in prayer and discernment. And what he's got is not a bunch of blame. What he's got is not a bunch of victimization kind of language. But what he's got is this message of hope and peace. That he's talking about God's always doing something new even in the midst of the worst situation. And there is reason to hope. God is going to restore Jerusalem. There will be a soundtrack of laughter that replaces that soundtrack of tears, and things are going to get better. He has what Walter Brueggemann called the prophetic imagination. He talks in poetic language. It's not necessarily literal that the lions are going to become vegetarians, right? They're metaphors. It's poetry. And he's asking the people, can you see it? Can you imagine it? See, imagination, there's a proverb that says imagination is seeing something in your mind, a destination in your mind before your legs get to that point. That you have to see it before you get there. And I kind of wonder, when we look at the mess that our world has become, all of the pain, all of the violence, even looking at Jerusalem itself right now, what message is there for us in this moment? You're all looking at me right now. Dave, what have you got? Battle of Carthage? Come on. I'll tell you what I've got. I've got the same message that Isaiah had. Can you see it? You look at that list of things that Isaiah talked about. He talked about health for the infants. He's talking about infant mortality. Can you see a society that takes poverty seriously enough to do something about the infant mortality crisis that we have in many ethnic communities in our country today and impoverished places around the world? Can you see it where children grow up like Isaiah talked about? They grow up not having to worry about their safety at school, and they can play, and they have food enough to eat and water to drink. That there's a day that comes where there's not in our world 800 million people who are food insecure. Can you see it where people are allowed to get old? That means there's got to be, what? Health care. Resources. Can you see it a day when laughter and joy replace the violence? Isaiah talks about housing. There's going to be enough houses for everybody. Sounds like he's talking to our group, right? He's talking to laborers, that they shall work and get the results of their labor and be treated well and get to have enough to live. This is still the dream for us. Some people think that the world's supposed to get worse. Right? You ever hear that? Like it's God's script. Like before the apocalypse, everything goes to hell in a handbag. Right? That's not the way it works. The prophets, even where you get some of that stuff in Revelation, it's probably talking about things that were happening currently when it was being written in the Roman Empire, and not things way out in the future. And even where it talks about things in the future, talks about the ultimate vision is things getting better, heaven coming to earth. That things are supposed to get better. God is always trying to create and make things better. It's not God's script that things get worse. God is active in making the world better through people, through our actions, through our living it out. He even puts out there this vision of peace. The wolf and the lamb shall be together. And we can look at that not in a cynical way like Woody Allen said, sure, the wolf and the lamb can dwell together, but you're going to need an infinite supply of lambs. It's a metaphor. The other day, there was a Thanksgiving service at Temple Israel. And you know, the Jewish community right now, it's a tough time for them, and there's different opinions and thoughts about what should happen and where things are going and how to deal with Hamas and how to retain integrity and not become what you hate. All of that is going on. And the rabbi told his congregation the previous Friday, he said, you know, listen, there's a lot that we can't control, that we don't know. We can do some things. And one of the things we can do is host an interfaith Thanksgiving service. Try to do something positive and celebrate what's good in the world. I don't know if the wolf can lay down with the lamb, but I saw the imam, the Muslim leader in the community, hug the rabbi, and both proclaim with the Christian community around them this vision for peace, of making peace with each other as a start that bleeds over and leads to a better world. Can you see it? See, imagination has to lead always. Walter Brueggemann talks about this prophetic imagination that we're called to embrace because our imagination shapes our behavior and what we're doing. You know, it's more than positive thinking. It's about actually being able to see something good, you know, arrive in your life and in the world. And I was thinking about how this story about how imagination can be so powerful that in the 1950s, there was a cargo ship that some worker went down to check to see if everything had been unloaded, and he got locked in a refrigeration unit. And it went off to sea with him in it. And on the walls, when they opened it up, a few days after they got into port, they opened up this container and found him dead inside, but on the walls of the container he had written in detail about the pain he was going through, how the cold was getting him and paralysis was setting in, and how he was in his last breaths. Well, that was a surprise because the refrigeration wasn't on. It was 66 degrees in there. But his mind led the way, and he believed that story so much it became true. What stories might you be believing in that shape negative experiences instead of positive ones? Our imagination is like a muscle, something that can strengthen and something we need to pay attention to, because we can get so tunnel visioned on just the negative all of the time that we can't raise our eyes beyond that horizon and see God's working toward a new day for all of us. And so we have it for our society, a new vision out there. We have it for our personal lives. And I also kind of think about it as a church. What's God's vision for us as a congregation? And you're looking at me saying, Dave, what have you got for that vision? Well, let me tell you about a ragtag group of misfits. See, maybe we're all misfits, right? Because this is the place where you can go, where you don't have to believe exactly like somebody else tells you you have to believe. This is the place where you can have your doubts, you can have your questions, you can have your struggles, but somehow you have this hope and this belief that things can get better, that you can get better, that our world can get better. I see a vision of a church that does the things that Isaiah is concerned about, that looks after the children, to create safe places where even when they feel weird and like they're misfits, they can come here and be accepted. Where anybody who feels that they're a misfit to the rest of society can fit in just fine here. I see us as a hub for creativity in the arts, especially music. I see us as a church that continues to practice compassion and action and volunteering and reaching out and making our community better. I see us as a church that when something happens in the community, people turn their lonely eyes to Bayshore Church for some hope. You know, like this summer when there was a stabbing over in the park, the city council called our church and said, can we host a community event at Bayshore Church to talk about what happened? I see us as a church not so interested in numbers, but in impact. Because every day you have the chance to impact a child who doesn't feel like he belongs or she belongs somewhere else. You have the chance to impact the life of an elderly person, somebody who has lost their spouse, somebody who has just retired and wondering, gosh, I thought golf would be more fun and fulfilling than it's turning out to be. What now? You're impacting people's lives on a daily basis, and it matters. I see a church that makes a difference in people's lives and in the community every day. Can you see it? Amen.